who represents Danbury, a portion of Bethel, New Fairfield, and Sherman. And we're here tonight so that we can talk a little bit about the financial challenges of our state. I specifically wanted to share with you some of the concerns that I've heard about the proposed state budget. As most of you know, on April 6th at Broadview Middle School at 7 o'clock, Governor Malloy will be visiting Danbury to present his budget to the community. And so I would ask that those of you that are available come and hear Governor Malloy's proposal, his budget, and he'll give you an opportunity for some questions and answers after his presentation. Now, you've probably read a lot about the budget, so we are going to cover some of the specifics, but it's more of a global discussion. And I'm going to ask that you hold your questions until we get through a fairly brief presentation. And then when you have a question, we'll ask you to just come up front if you don't mind, so that everyone can hear you, and use the microphone to ask your question. And then I will do my best to address your concern. I'd like to first thank Mayor Bowden for hosting us tonight. I see the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Wayne Shepard, is here. Wayne, thank you for your help. Our night Mayor, Jimmy Bargallo, thanks for your help setting everything up. I see our Registrar of Voters, Mary Ann Doran, is here. The President of our City Council, Joe Cabo, is here. Thank you, Joe, for being here. My beautiful life partner is here. We have to introduce my dear wife, Alicia, who's very seldom with me on the political roadshow, but it's close to home, so we got her to come out tonight. I also see a number of members of the Common Council, Shay Negershath, Mary Teicholz. Who am I missing? Thank you. Don't have my glasses on.
Phil Curran, Don Taylor.
Phil Curran and Don Taylor. Thank you. Thank you, President Joe. And I said hello to all of you. So, once again, I want to thank you all for being here. The process in the state of Connecticut is the governor presents a budget and makes a budget address and then presents it to the legislature for their final approval. So the governor's budget is a proposal. It is up to the state legislature to make the final decision. They'll pass a budget, we, the legislature, will pass a budget, and then the budget will go back to the governor for his final approval and signature, or veto, which the governor has the option to veto the budget. But I want to put into perspective some of the things that are tell us a little bit about the economy in Connecticut, and more importantly, what's happened to state spending here in Connecticut in relation to the economy and our population. If you look at this slide, and I hope you can all see it, this technology is great now. We didn't have this when I was in City Hall, but this screen shows a graph of state government, in my estimation, has grown too large. And we look at 1987 as the starting point, which, as you may recall, is just a few years before the Connecticut state income tax came into being. That was in 1991. So we use 1987 as the base point, so you can sort of get a feel for what happened to state government before and after the implementation of the state income tax. But the blue line shows Connecticut's population growth since 1987. That's the flat line along the bottom. We've gone up about 9% in population. The top line on this chart shows the real government expenditure, inflation adjusted. And so what you're seeing is that the current budget that's being proposed has increased, is 287% higher than the base year of 1987, with 9% growth in population. So that gives you just sort of an idea of what's happened to government in the state of Connecticut. And this is really, frankly, not unique to Connecticut. There are some states who are approaching these numbers, but Connecticut tops them all in the growth of government. The green line on this chart shows the consumer price index growth over the same period. So the consumer price index has gone up 90%. Our population has gone up 9%, but government spending has gone up 287%. So the challenge that we face is that our government has grown far too fast for the size of our state. And this is now the time for us to rethink the way that we run state government, and that's part of what we want to talk about tonight. The budget deficit that you've all heard about is monumental in many ways, but you know, we keep hearing about billions and trillions of dollars, and it's kind of hard to comprehend what that means because no one has ever seen a billion or a trillion dollars. But to put it into perspective, if you have a large amount of waste in any operation, in a private operation, you're always going to be looking to save money. But we don't do that in government. See, government grows by creation of new laws. We pass new laws, and we determine that government should get into a new business, or should offer a new service, or should provide a new type of program to the residents of the state. And we don't do a cost-benefit analysis to find out, does it make sense? Can we do it cheaper without state employees and let the private sector do the work for us? Or do we look at what is the ultimate cost over a long period of time? So the decisions that are made in state government often are far too short-sighted. When you make a decision for a major purchase, you're always going to be looking for what will it cost me a couple of years down the road. We don't have that vision when we, and I say we meaning the state legislature, we don't have that same vision in results-based budgeting that you do in your own home, or that the private sector does when they create a budget. So that helps put into perspective, how did we get these budget deficits? The graph shows the gap between state government revenue and spending in the current year and projected for the next 2 years. And so what happened last year was we had this huge budget deficit, but instead of cutting spending, what we did was borrow $1 billion for 10 years. So that's sort of like the CL&P bill comes and you use your MasterCard to pay for the CL&P bill, and you're making minimum monthly payments on your MasterCard. That's sort of what we did last year. The one-time measures that we used to balance the budget last year, when we had a very difficult budget challenge under Governor Rell, well, let me take a step back for a minute. We had a budget challenge last year of a little under $3 billion. The challenge this year is $7 billion. So the challenge is far greater than we had last year because the economy continued to go down over the last year. But this is what some of the one-time measures were utilized last year to balance the budget. We had federal stimulus money, often referred to as Obama bucks. That money was handed out like candy across the country, and it was about $757 million that came to the state of Connecticut that we used for education funding to balance last year's budget. So what did that do? Well, some would say that that was a very good choice to make because it avoided cutting local education grants from the state of Connecticut and avoided teacher layoffs. So we all agree that we don't want to lay off teachers. We want to continue a good education program. But the reality is that we had a big hole in our education funding, and we were able to balance it only with this one-time infusion of cash from Washington, D.C. That money is gone this year. We also sweeped all the accounts. Now, what we mean by a sweep is that we went into all of the accounts, and Mayor Boughton does this in City Hall too. He'll put on a spending freeze sometimes 3, 4, 5 months before the end of the fiscal year and say to the department head, sorry, you may not have spent any more of your money in that particular account, and grab the money, we call it a sweep in state government, and said, you didn't spend it yet, we're taking it back. So that was $157 million. Now to put that into perspective, the budget here in Danbury is about 200. So basically we took 3/4 of the Danbury budget and just took it all back 3 months before the end of the fiscal year and said, sorry, you can't spend that money. We also had added a new tax on corporations of $2 billion. And one of the things that's probably gotten the most press and the most phone calls of complaint, did anyone get a CL&P bill and notice that there was a new tax on your bill? Let me tell you how that worked out. That was an 11th hour idea to come up with some additional funds. And so what they decided to do was to continue a tax that was ready to expire on your electric bill. It was supposed to stop. And they said, well, we're going to keep charging that and then sell the projected revenue on those electric bills to go borrow more money. They're called revenue bonds. So we took the money for the next 10 years, 7 years, and grabbed it up front to balance last year's budget. So you have to pay that for 7 years now just to pay last year's light bill. So it was those kinds of one-time infusions of cash to balance last year's budget. We also spent all of our rainy day fund, that would be your savings account. That was $1.4 billion. That money is now all gone. So basically we took all of the easy, some would say the low-hanging fruit, if you will, and grabbed all the low-hanging fruit, the savings account, the Obama bucks, your electric bill, wherever they could grab a few bucks, and the ultimate result was we now don't have any of those savings available to us to help balance the budget this year. Give you an idea, where does the money come from as far as revenue? Well, most people are a little surprised when they see this pie chart, but 33% comes from personal income taxes, 20% comes from the federal government, and only 16% comes from sales taxes. And then, of course, all those other smaller pieces of the pie are business taxes, gambling. We bring in a lot of money in gambling in the state of Connecticut, $739 million. Gas taxes, tobacco taxes, and things of that nature that are much smaller parts of the pie, if you will. So most people are very surprised when they see where the chunk of the money really comes from. The top 10% of income tax filers in Connecticut, the top 10%, pay 59% of the income tax. Now you'd be very surprised to see where that 10% falls. They're not mega millionaires at 10%. The mega millionaires are the top 1%. But in this area of Connecticut, a good portion of families with 2 children owning their own home with 2 cars fall into the top 10% bracket. So that's in little old Danbury. You would think that's all Greenwich taxpayers. It's not. It's the upper middle class right here in our backyard. The bottom 40% by earnings of income tax filers in the state of Connecticut pay 1% of the income tax. So when you hear the comment sometimes that we have to tax our way out of this and that we have to look to the ultra wealthy to pay the tab, those numbers already tell us that's what's going on now. It's already happening. So if you want to pile on a little bit more to the upper 1%, our concern, my concern is, well, first of all, there aren't too many 1%ers in Danbury. We do have some, but there aren't too many 1%ers in Danbury. But the problem with a top 1% earner who's making a lot of money is that they generally have more than one home. And they can easily change their domicile, their official residence, to another state without an income tax. So we all hear of the stories of people who live in Florida for 6 months and a day. Some of them are in our neighborhood right now, and the snowbirds are starting to come back. And that's really why some people decide to do that, because there's a tremendous tax obligation savings by having their residence elsewhere. Now, where does the money go? This is another surprise to an awful lot of people, and frankly, in some cases, it was a surprise to me. Even though I was familiar with state government, it was a surprise to me that the biggest chunk is education in the state of Connecticut. 21% of the total state budget is for education. Now, no one in this room believes that we should not provide a first-class education to the children of the state of Connecticut. I think that a lot of the people in this room, some of whom I know personally who are retired, are concerned that we spend too much money on education. However, having said that, I think that Connecticut does have some of the best, most dedicated education funding in the United States. And frankly, if you compare us to other states, even in the Northeast, where it is often considered to be the best education in the Northeast, public education, Connecticut is doing a great job. Now, there are challenges, as we all know. Major cities, even some neighborhoods of Danbury have a challenge with education. Those who are English as a second language, or English language learners, as they're known today, ELL. That presents some challenges for the public education system, but I was surprised to see that it's really 21% of the total budget that covers education. 13% is for regulation, corrections, courthouses, public safety, motor vehicles, the insurance commissioner, the labor commissioner, economic and community development, workers' compensation, things like that. That's 13%. 11% of the state budget is just to pay for our debt. Now, Connecticut has one of the highest per capita, that's by per person population, that's what we mean by per capita, the highest state debt in the country. So that means that for a small state, we're borrowing tons and tons of money. One of the highest, I'm sorry. We're borrowing tons and tons of money. And we've reached a point where the bond investment services that rate the bonds, A, B, C, whatever the risk of a bond is, the rating agencies like Moody's have said, Connecticut, you got to stop those one-time gimmicks like you did last year. And you have to stop borrowing so much money because you're right up to here in debt now. So the challenge we face is that we already are paying 11% of our total budget in paying back existing debt. And one of the ways that the governor wants to approach the current budget process is to continue borrowing lots of money. And I fear that we're going to have to slow down that borrowing for the foreseeable future until we can play catch up a little bit on the debt outstanding now. State employee and retiree benefits is 11%. That's not salaries. That's pension and health care. Is 11% of the total budget. The salaries are built into each of the department line items, but just the benefit package is 11%. Health and hospitals, 9%. Nursing homes, 6%. So it's about 15% of our budget is the health care of our population. who are getting state services and state payment, not under insurance, private insurance. Conservation and development, that's environmental protection, agriculture, culture and tourism is 6%. Now here's, for clarification, the state employees' pay is part of nearly every category on the chart, but when you add up together all of the benefits in the budget and their salaries, it's about 28% of the budget. So the biggest chunk of the budget is people in all of the different departments. And so that's why the governor's proposal is asking for state employees to give back so much money, because that's the biggest chunk in the pie. We'll get to that proposal that he has in a minute. Here's one of the challenges that we face in Connecticut is the high cost of living and doing business here. And I do see some business people here that have complained a time or two to me about many of the challenges of doing business here, either the regulations of state government or the burdensome taxes and fees and permit costs of state government. But this sort of puts that into perspective. The nation's highest total state and local taxes is here in Connecticut. That's $7,007 per person. Now that's per capita, that's per person. So that means everyone who's 90 years old and everyone who's 9 months old is $7,007, the highest in the country. The second highest in the country of unfunded pension liability, which means that we in the state of Connecticut have promised pension benefits to our state employees, but we have failed to put the money aside to pay for it. That's $4,500 per person in the state of Connecticut that we still owe. We're the fourth highest state debt at $7,882 per person in the state of Connecticut. 45 states in America have fewer health insurance mandates. So what's a health insurance mandate? Every year at the state capitol, we have proposals to force private insurance carriers to add a new type of coverage. And frankly, we would like to be able to say yes to all of them, because all of those ideas have come forth from constituents who have felt a challenge where they needed the support of health care, and their carrier, their health insurance company, didn't cover that particular health problem. So what we mean by health mandates is that it's forcing those insurance companies to cover a new item that they haven't previously covered as part of the policy. It's easy to vote yes for those things. It's harder to take a stand and say, no, we can't. Now, I'll tell you that I have voted for one of those big mandates, and that was for autism coverage, because I had an overwhelming lobbying effort from residents in my district here in these 4 towns, from the autism community, who said you have to give us better coverage, and I voted yes for it. In the same year, I voted no for 3 other healthcare coverage mandates. So those are very tough decisions that have to be made. And Connecticut is already the most generous in the requirements of health insurance coverage. And that means our health insurance is more expensive. That means the cost of doing business in Connecticut is equally more expensive. We're the second highest state in America for gas taxes, and those are being proposed to go higher. I believe that's going to come very close to making us the highest in the country if the proposal that's on the table now is approved. We're the 5th highest cost of doing business according to the Milken Institute. And I've heard some business people in particular industries tell me that we're the highest cost, depending upon what type of specific things they need. And last but not least, we're the 2nd highest for electricity cost. The only higher one is Hawaii. So those are just a few of the examples of the challenges we face in the high cost of doing business in Connecticut. I want to touch a little bit on Governor Malloy's proposal. And in this venue, in this short meeting, it's difficult to go through an entire budget, but I want to touch on some of the high points. Now, I will tell you that there are some ideas in his budget that I am absolutely positively in agreement on. What you'll hear as this progresses, this meeting progresses, is there are a number of items in the budget that I'm highly troubled with and that I think are long-term challenges for the state. The biggest problem is that Governor Malloy's budget increases spending. Now, when you hear the proposal as stating that it is decreasing spending, here's the real number. If you look at how much Governor Jody Rell's budget was before she left office, and you compare that number to the proposal from Governor Malloy for the next 2 years, Malloy's budget is higher in spending. The reason why government says that they're cutting spending is they use the basis for what we anticipate the growth should be in the next 2 years. So they have built-in growth in spending costs. And they say, well, we're cutting from what the growth should be, not what it really was. So for instance, in our home budgets, if you spend $10,000 on your total living expenses for an entire year, and you know that this year you can only have $9,000 to spend, you spend $9,000. Government doesn't do it that way. Government says it was $10,000 this year and it's got to be $11,200 next year. And if we're going to cut, we cut from $11,200, we don't cut from $10,000. So the bottom line is that this budget does have more spending. This budget proposal has more spending than last year. I mentioned briefly the budget gap and what makes up the proposal to deal with the burdensome budget gap of roughly $7 billion over the next 2 years. Now, the biggest part of the budget gap fix is the governor is proposing that state employees give up $2 billion in their current contracts so that we can help balance the budget. Let me put that in perspective. We have about 46,000 state employees. So if you take $2 billion and divide it by 46,000, you've got a little under $22,000 per year for 2 years. So it's a little under $44,000 that Governor Malloy is saying to state employees, that's what you have to give back to us to help us balance the budget. Well, is there anybody in this room that thinks that anybody's going to want to give up $22,000, especially if you already have a contract that doesn't expire for a while? That's going to be a big challenge to reach that. And in defense of the state employees, the rank and file state employees that I've spoken to, and I must tell you, I've spoken to many rank and file state employees who live in my neighborhood. The ones that I've spoken to have said, we get it, we understand we have to try and do something, we get it. It's the negotiators from the unions that are folding their arms and saying, can't do it. Department of Corrections said last week at a meeting, don't give them anything. They don't have to, they have a contract. So there's a big cavern here. There's a big divide between the governor saying we need $2 billion and the unions who really are holding the cards in this. Now, if you've got, if you look at the big picture, he's saying that, the governor is saying that 30% of this fix in the budget has to come from the employees. But I would submit to you that if we used 2 years ago as the example, when Governor Rell had to negotiate givebacks from state employees, they have 17 bargaining units in state government, and 3 or 4 of them refused to participate in the giveback negotiations. So 14, I think it was, out of 17 agreed to take furloughs, pay some more money in their copay, things like that. and it gave us about $600 million. But to get that deal, to get that $600 million, now keep in mind, we need $2 billion from them this year. To get that $600 million, Governor Rell had to give them a guarantee of no layoffs for 2 years. So what happens now if we need $2 billion? So I just want to put in perspective how challenging it is, but more importantly for the state employees who have this big challenge of being asked or dragged to the table, and they're willing to participate. But I submit to you that I think the negotiators for the unions are playing the hardball, and it's going to be very difficult to get to the end game, especially get there and expect $2 billion from state employees. 58% of the fix is from increasing taxes. So what does it mean? Everybody's taxes are going up. It touches everybody because I'm getting phone calls from people who are in retirement, and I'm getting phone calls from the average family with 2 kids whose taxes are also going up. Probably the biggest complaint that I'm getting, and it probably fits this room pretty well, is that you immediately lose the $500 annual tax credit, personal property tax credit on your state income tax. But there are dozens and dozens of other taxes and fees that are being proposed to be increased. And I think everyone in this room realizes, well, you know, a reasonable amount of increase, I suppose, is expected. But I believe that we can't ask for more taxes until we've done a really fine job of reorganizing state government, learning to live within our means, and finding more efficient ways to deliver state services with less money. We haven't done any of that yet, even though we have some. Now, I will tell you that I participated for 18 months on a state agency known as the Commission on Enhancing Agency Outcomes, and we've provided a report to the legislature with lots of ideas of how to restructure state government, and found some really simple ideas in some cases of how to save substantial amounts of money. One of the ways, believe it or not, is that if we could just say to all state employees and all state vendors, that means contractors and everybody, no more paper checks. We're going to pay you electronically with direct deposit. If we could just do that, it's hundreds of millions of dollars in savings every year. It's hard to count. I'm sorry. Tens of millions of dollars in savings. I made a mistake on that. Every single year, just by getting rid of paper checks. And we have to go to each and every one of the union contracts to get permission to do that. So it started with something as simple as that, and some of the other bigger proposals are how we handle our Medicare, Medicaid, our drug benefits, and things of that nature that save hundreds of millions of dollars as a potential savings. Mayor Bowden has joined us. Thank you, Mayor, for being here tonight. We appreciate that. So the next page talks about, and I see that most of you have the handout, talks about the increases in revenue. I'm not going to go through all of these. There are dozens of proposed increases, new taxes. I went to get a haircut, and the gal who cuts my hair said, do they understand that if you're going to start taxing a haircut now, that amount of tax is really going to come out of my pocket, not out of my customers, because I can't raise my fees in this economy. And I understand that. I mean, I understand that 6.35% new sales tax on a haircut is coming right out of the haircutter's earnings, not necessarily out of the customer's earnings, because they're concerned about raising their fee for the haircut. And then there's plenty of sin taxes there, cigarettes and alcohol. But one of the biggest challenges that we face in Danbury is something that was proposed last year and now is back again this year. We were able to kill the idea last year, but they have a hospital tax. And basically what the hospital tax will do is give a higher tax to healthy hospitals, Danbury and Milford, and redistribute that tax to the unhealthy hospitals, Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, so that our hospitals here that are very well run, I believe, who already have challenges dealing with a very large amount of uninsured people, already participate in our community in many, many ways without direct benefit in payment of any kind. The hospital tax will be a big hit against our local hospitals here in Western Connecticut to the tune of $400 million statewide. So what does it mean? Well, the bottom line here, we haven't gotten all the details back from the new Danbury Western Connecticut health systems, but it could mean dozens or perhaps 100 employees at Danbury Hospital, and cutbacks in services because they're looking at somewhere around $18 million to their bottom line from this tax. The hospitals that are very healthy, primarily in Western Connecticut, are all feeling the pinch from this proposal. So you're probably even going to hear something from your doctor, and you'll hear more about the hospital tax in the coming days. That's a big problem that we were able to kick it aside last year, but I fear that it is going to hit us hard here in Greater Danbury. So I talked about an average family earnings. 2 kids, 1 that drives, they're homeowners, 2 people working. Earnings is $120,000 a year. That's in the top 10% that I talked about. That family is in the top 10%. But we all know that the cost of living in Connecticut, with children running at home and so forth, that 120 is not really wealthy. It's certainly living comfortable, but it's not wealthy. But we use that individual as an example of the impact of the tax proposal. And it's about $1,090 every year on that family of 4. The governor's budget proposal will impact taxpayers at every level. We use this hypothetical example because it's a fairly common family structure with the greatest earning potential. The sales tax rate would increase from 6% to 6.35%, but it would begin taxing a number of new items and services that previously were not taxed. So here's a case in point. You're going to buy a new car. The car costs $30,000. Car costs $25,000, and you're trading in your old junker, and they're going to give you $5,000 for it. So the way it is now is you would pay 6% sales tax on the gross selling price minus the trade-in, or in this case, $20,000. The new proposal says we're not going to give you the credit on the trade-in. You have to pay the sales tax on the full selling price of the car. The question also becomes, do you also have to pay sales tax on things before you apply a discount coupon? So in some cases, if you have a 10% off coupon and you walk into PC Richard to buy something, do you have to pay the sales tax on the gross selling price? Those are the kinds of things that they're looking into now to try to grab more revenue. That is yet to be decided, but those are some of the challenges that we're concerned about. So that's my summary of a real global view. I started my comments by saying that there are a number of good ideas in Governor Malloy's budget. One of the things that Mayor Bowden, I'm sure, is very happy about is they have not, in this proposal from the governor, cut state grants to municipalities. So that helps the chief elected officials of towns that rely on a significant grant from state government to run the schools. That was flat funded, so to speak. At the same time, they are eliminating or proposing elimination of the machine tax credit. So a company like Barton's is given a credit for their machinery in the building, so they don't have to pay property tax on a portion of the equipment in their building. And that was an incentive that was created many, many, many years ago to try to retain manufacturing jobs in the state of Connecticut. So the governor's proposal says, we're not going to pay the municipalities for that tax credit anymore, but they want to leave the tax credit on the books. So what that means is that the mayor has to figure out a way to say to Barton, I can't give you that money anymore. What do I have to do to keep you here? And Barton or any company says, well, we would like to stay, but we don't want to pay more taxes. All they're doing with this proposal is taking the money away from the local municipality, but leaving the ability to provide the tax out there, the tax credit out there. Now the burden becomes local property taxpayers' obligation. So it's just shifting the burden downhill. That I think is pretty much the mayor's point on that. 1.6 million is the hit to the Danbury city budget. And that's a significant amount of money in the big picture of a relatively mid-sized city here in Connecticut. The Republican legislators are in the minority at the state capitol. We have 14 Republican state senators. We have 40, what's the new number? Because we had 2 special elections. We have 41 Republican legislators in the House out of 151. We have proposed over the last 2 years that I've been there alternative budget proposals, both to Governor Rell's budget and we're preparing a final budget proposal for Governor Malloy's budget. And it talks about some pretty significant changes in the way state government operates. Now, I'm only going to touch on it very briefly. It's available online. I hope you'll read it. In fact, there may even be hard copies. Peggy, there's hard copies of our proposal, known as the Common Sense Commitment to Connecticut. We're basically saying don't spend any more money than you bring in. It's sort of a novel idea for government, but in this economy, we have to do it that way. Borrow only the amount of money that you can afford to pay back. And I submit to you right now, when we're spending 11% of our total budget on paying back current debt, that we really can't afford to borrow any money right now. So we have to sit tight and wait until this economy improves before we can continue to borrow more money. If it's not broken, don't fix it, but if it's not working, get rid of it. What does that mean? Well, listen, state government operates very well in a lot of ways. I must admit that I am always surprised. Every day I meet a new state employee or I interact in a new way with someone who's providing services on the front line. We do a lot of things really well. The problem is that we do a lot of things that private enterprise does far better than state government can ever dream of doing. And we have to get out of the business of being in the business of private business when they can do it much better. And I will tell you that one of the examples of that is ability beyond disability. former Daytar organization, which has group homes in the greater Danbury area and across the state of Connecticut. They know how to run a group home for 41% of the cost it takes state government to run the same operation. 41%. So if that can be done in that kind of business, that's frontline social services, that's the safety net, that's the important things that state government should be doing and can be doing, but they can't do it better than a private enterprise can do it. I submit that we need to get out of that business in state government and let the private sector, the private nonprofit organizations who are dozens in our own community that can provide those kind of services far better, far more efficient, and for a lot less money. We need to get out of the way and let them do it. Sometimes you hear politicians talk about creating jobs. Government doesn't create jobs. People do. People in this room, business people in this room create jobs. So if government can get out of the way of business and let them do their thing, let them use their entrepreneurial spirit and stay out of the way, that's how we create jobs. If you look at what's happened in the state of Connecticut's government since 1987, you'll see that the biggest increase in jobs in the state of Connecticut since the state income tax was created, the sector of the economy that has created more jobs in the state of Connecticut is government. Let me say that again. Since the state income tax was implemented in the state of Connecticut, the sector of business and government that has created the most jobs in the state of Connecticut is government, not the private sector. And that's wrong. So we've got to switch that so that the private sector can get back to work, manufacturing, providing services, and there are many ways that we can get about doing that. But if we keep stepping in front of business and expecting them to carry the load, they're not going to grow jobs here in Connecticut, they're going to do it elsewhere. Last but not least, I think that state government should empower local government to make decisions. State government, I think the mayor will concur with me that one of the challenges of the Connecticut legislature is something known as unfunded mandates. So what's an unfunded mandate? Well, here's an example. I mentioned to you the machinery tax credit. It's currently funded by state government through the municipality, $1.6 million. Here's another tax credit. The legislature thought it'd be a great idea to provide special tax credits to veterans. Sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? Veterans get a property tax credit. It's optional. So it requires the local municipality to create and provide the tax credit. So all state government did was come up with this really neat idea, not put any money behind it, and then require the local government and the local property taxpayers to fund the tax credit. Now, no one's going to argue that a veteran's tax credit isn't a good idea, but the point I'm making is, let state government make the decisions. Stop rolling down unfunded mandates like that and get out of the way. There are several other examples. Certainly, collective bargaining is something that's not going to go away. I think it's important that employees have the right to bargain. But some of the things that happen now, known as binding arbitration, is not conducive to allowing a local municipality to survive any argument with an employee union. And so some people would suggest that binding arbitration has to be revisited. That binding arbitration is costing local taxpayers, in some cases, some estimates, 10% of the total tax bill is coming out of binding arbitration. So these are some of the things that need to be looked at. and seriously considered. But it's really going to require some tough decisions. And what we'll find out over the next month or so is how willing is our legislature, who is run by the Democratic majority, and our governor, who is the boss of the Democratic Party in Connecticut now, are they willing to step up to the plate to make some of these tough decisions that really have to be made? I think we're all hoping and praying. We are all hoping and praying that the right decisions will be made, that reasonable people will agree to disagree on certain issues. But when it comes to the end of the line, and we have to find a way to fund state government and assist local governments, we have to find ways to do it efficiently, without burdensome regulation, and we have to get out of the way of business so that business can help jumpstart this economy. Thank you. So, does anybody have any questions?
What's the good news?
What's the good news? Boy, was it that bad?
That's pretty bad.
Well, let me say that, what's the good news? We're getting reports that unemployment is going down in the state of Connecticut. We're getting very good reports about Western Connecticut in particular. Danbury's economy is far better than many other parts of the state of Connecticut. Keep in mind that Connecticut traditionally is the last one into a recession and often the last one out of a recession. Danbury has been and continues to be an economic engine to our state, and I believe that our region is faring much better. We get some good news every day about companies who are starting to, fire up their engines again. We're hearing about new jobs that are coming here, but we have to keep paying attention to the existing businesses that are here to make sure that we can help them remain healthy so that they can continue to grow. It's always nice to hear about a new company coming in or a new restaurant opening at the mall or a new store at the mall. That's all good news. But we have to really make sure that the companies that are here and have been here for years and years are getting all they need to jumpstart their business. And state government can help, I think, in a lot of ways by getting out of the way. So, recap, I think that our economy in Western Connecticut is far greater than almost everywhere else in the state. There's a couple of pockets in Eastern Connecticut where it's doing pretty good, but the Danbury area is faring fairly well.
Can you talk to the impact of federal health care on our budget as we go forward and that is implemented?
Well, federal health care, I've been fairly outspoken on that, and the president of my fan club in the back of the room has been sort of hammering me on that, but I think that, first of all, I think that that's the proper question for our federal legislator. But I will tell you that the Obamacare, the federal health care plan that was passed, which I frankly don't support a lot of it for a few reasons, and here's basically my major point. I do believe that the federal health care plan is basically doing what I just described to you that state government does to local municipalities. They pass an idea of a law, and they sort of pass on the burden to pay for it to other people. And that's what's happened with the federal health care plan. It's really not being funded entirely by the federal government. The burden to fund all of this new coverage is really going to be coming out of your check to the state of Connecticut on April 15th. It's the state taxpayer that's going to have to fund it. And that's an unfunded mandate from the federal government to the states. And it's sort of like, the snowball going downhill. So that's the first challenge, is that it's an unfunded mandate. I think the second challenge, and this is all fairly basic and global, this is really the question for your federal legislator, but the concern I have is that when we have to set up more bureaucracy in state government to administer what the federal health care plan, commonly referred to as Obamacare, is implemented, we're growing state government, along with the federal government, to implement the plan. And I think that just smacks right in the point I'm saying is, government doesn't grow jobs. Let the private sector do it best. Sure, there should be regulation, but creating more bureaucracy to implement a massive new entitlement, I think is wrong-headed. And I think that we have to rethink the way that's being implemented. Sure, there are needs for uninsured. There are needs for pre-existing conditions, people who have a challenge getting insured with a pre-existing condition. The idea of being allowed to keep your college student on your own health insurance plan until age 26 sounds like a reasonable idea. Those are three really important points of the health care plan. The problem is that there are so many other mandates that are going with that that I think it's overwhelming. And ultimately, it's going to roll downhill to the states. About $1 billion to state taxpayers just in Connecticut that we know of. And we don't even know the impact of this whole thing yet, but it's about $1 billion so far a year. And ultimately, if the burden is on the state, well, isn't the state going to keep passing it on down to the local taxpayer? So now it's back to the property tax again. So it's a big challenge. Listen, we all understand, everybody in this room says, nobody's going to disagree that our healthcare system needs fixing. But if our healthcare system is broken the way some people say it is, then why are people coming from all over the world to get their healthcare here? My cousin lives in Canada, born and raised in Danbury, now lives in Canada, and is constantly telling me that this proposed healthcare plan, which mirrors the Canadian plan in many ways, is a really bad idea. So he lives there and he knows it. And by the way, he's also stood in line for elective surgery, elective orthopedic surgery, and has stood in line for a very long time, and is considering trying to save up enough money to come here and pay cash for it. And that happens all the time. I remember when my mom and dad had a home in Florida, they had friends, and this is quite a long time ago, they had friends from Canada who would come to Florida for the winter and have their health care taken care of while they were here in the States. So very, very challenging question, not one that I can answer here very easily, but that is a question really for our federal legislators.
Yeah, pretty good answer, I think.
Yeah, very good.
Michael, what's the status on the proposal I read about that they were going to remand some of the sales tax revenue from, because in Danbury we sent so much sales tax revenue to the state and we get so little back. There was a proposal to remand a portion of that back to the, our local area.
Right. Good question. Mr. Taylor was saying that the new proposal for sales tax increases is supposed to give some money out of that sales tax pot to the local governments. So if you use that calculation, the Danbury Fair Mall is the largest enclosed mall in all of New England. Between the Danbury Fair Mall and the car dealers in the greater Danbury area, we are an economic engine to the sales tax pot every year. Lots of the big percentage of the sales tax comes out of Danbury. The challenge is that the companies who have a store at the mall may not report by store where their sales are when they make their tax payment, their sales tax payment, or remit the sales taxes to the state government. So for instance, several of the stores in the mall also have a store at Blueback Square or at the West Farms Mall in West Hartford. That's where they're reporting. So all of the millions of dollars in sales in the Danbury store are being reported out of the Hartford store, which is skewing the numbers. They haven't figured that out yet. There is a way to figure it out, but they haven't figured it out yet. So very good question. That's going to mean a lot.
This 30% concession that's anticipated from the unions, I tend to agree with what you said earlier, that if we take the actual dollars, it's an unrealistic expectation to get 30% from the unions. What action is currently forecast in the event that the unions do not agree to contribute?
That's a reasonable question that we don't have an answer to. That's between Governor Malloy. That's a good question for the governor on April 6th. He is in negotiations with his, the governor's negotiators are working with the unions now. There was a statement on Friday by Governor Malloy after the corrections union spokesperson said no givebacks. He was just a spokesperson. If you talk to the union people that are on the front line, they won't say that, but the union spokesperson for the corrections officer said no givebacks. And the Governor Malloy's response to that was, it's going to get nasty and ugly if they don't. So that's all we know. You can imagine what nasty and ugly is, but
How do we define
if you
that?
add up the numbers, it's big layoffs. And the problem with state employee layoffs is, it's not like a private enterprise that has a layoff. You know, a private enterprise has a layoff, they agree to pay you for 3, 4, 6 months, whatever they agree to do, and then you go on unemployment. A state employee layoff basically takes about 18 months, because we have to keep paying benefits and so forth for a period of time based upon current contracts. So layoff is not instantaneous. You don't realize the savings for layoffs until the next fiscal year at best.
Back on page 5 of the thing that we went through here, you inadvertently skipped over a point that said voted least business-friendly legislature by Expansion Magazine, Management Magazine. And I just wondered, first of all, if you could address that, why that is. And then the question of what can be done to make it easier, particularly small businesses, make it easier for small businesses to open up in Connecticut in general. I speak from a personal experience of having opened a small business here in Danbury many years ago, and I had a national franchise blueprint for the plans for the shop. And the city of Danbury insisted that I have a local architect draw plans for my shop, even though I had this approved national plan. Well, I turned my plans over to the architect, and he handed me plans back a couple of weeks later. They were identical, but he drew them. But every point about the plan was identical to the one I had from the national franchise. But it cost me $5,000, which could be a breaking point for some people getting into business, and that was not very business friendly. So, what can Connecticut do to make it easier for businesses to open and exist without undue regulation?
Well, that sounds like a somewhat unusual scenario. I believe that there are national, well, let's talk about building code. There's national building codes which the city of Danbury uses. And in many cases, in a complicated drawing, for instance, on a local project, I can't come in with a scribbled piece of paper and say this is what it is.
Well, this was not. This
Right.
was
I understand.
Yeah, it was a layout for a shop in a strip mall.
Right.
And that's all it was. And the plans I got back were identical to the one I handed you.
I can't answer that particular
But that
question.
was-
We'll do some research and find out, but let me give you an idea. You said, why are we rated so low as being business friendly? Let me just take
The
a
least
global.
business-friendly legislature, too. I'm interested in that statement.
Okay. Let me just address that question, because I can't answer the
Yeah,
specifics, although we'll find out for you why that is. There's a proposal in the state legislature this year that has been proposed many, many, many times before, I believe somewhere between 4 and 6 times before, for guaranteed sick days, including part-timers. So what does that mean? Well, for a small business owner, that means that their part-timer that comes to work after school now has to qualify for paid sick leave. Part-timers that work in restaurants, same thing. So the restaurant businesses and the small businesses, even the summer camp operation at the YMCA is saying, you're going to force us to take our summer workers and give them paid sick leave. You can't do that. So all you're going to do, if you pass that bill, is reduce the number of jobs available in that business. So the YMCA says, I'm going to hire fewer camp counselors for the summer, and the restaurant business is saying, I'm going to hire fewer people in my kitchen, and so on. That proposal keeps coming back. So it scares people. That's what they're talking about by least business friendly, are those kinds of proposals. Now I use that one because it's fresh in our mind. That's one that's prominent. And there's a lot of support for that bill. There are some people in this room that probably think, well, yeah, that's probably a good idea. You should have paid sick days. But we don't often think about what's the impact on the economy when we make those decisions. And that's what I said in the very beginning of my presentation, is that our legislature has to do a far better job of being visionary and understanding that the decision you make today will impact us for years to come. And a decision like that will negatively impact small business across the state of Connecticut for years to come. Yes, sir.
Just a question. I mean, what you portray is very compelling. It's obvious to a normal person that the state spending is out of control, that it's grown far too rapidly, and it doesn't appear that there's really a view in the short term that it's going to change. What is it that we can do that's going to change this?
Vote.
I vote all the time. Everybody in here, I'm sure, votes, but we vote in Danbury. We vote for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What can you do?
Well, I think you raise a good point, that there are, thank you. We have a handout for you on the way out that gives you the contact names for people to talk to.
Okay.
There's people in this room who probably have not been inclined to write letters or pick up the phone and talk to elected officials. But
Can I ask you a question on that? When I call my congressman, I get some administrator that answers the phone and takes down a message. I don't get a response, so I don't make calls. I write letters and I get form responses back. So I'm not sure what the value is.
Yeah.
How do we have an impact?
Well, let me tell you that it's very different for you to be calling Washington, D.C. than to be calling your state senator. But let me tell you what it means,
Okay.
having worked even in the mayor's office. When I get a handwritten letter,
Handwritten.
listen, when I get a handwritten letter, and it could be a note card, I disagree with you or I agree with you, I usually pick up the phone and call that person, because I don't get very many of those. When I get a typewritten letter, I respond to it. Thanks to Kelly Fournier, who's here tonight, my legislative aide. We get a response out to someone. And it's generally not a cookie cutter. We try to read into what it is. At this time of year when we have a legislative session, I get from 300 to 600 emails a day. So an email is less important to me just because of the sheer volume. Now, those of you in this room probably know that I respond to every email myself. Now, I may have a little bit of a cookie cutter response because I'm getting a cookie cutter email. So you can go to a website from AARP today, and AARP has this system where you just put your name and your email in and they send out all these emails, okay? And I know that. I know it's coming from AARP. I know your concern, and I have a response to that. But if it's sort of a handwritten email, I can tell, and I respond. So my point is that we track what people are saying. So your phone call to even to Washington DC, they're tracking that. They may not be picking up the phone and calling you back because they have so many people to cover, but they know that people are upset or in favor of a particular issue. So we watch that very carefully, even on the local level, even in the mayor's office. If the phone rings off the hook, you want to bet you that the mayor knows what that problem is within minutes. And it's the same with me. If I get a lot of emails on a particular issue, and there were many on the property tax, we're getting a lot of emails now from the realtors because they're talking about increasing the tax on the conveyance tax on real estate transactions. Phones ringing off the hook, lots of emails. We know. So don't be discouraged. I mean, don't be discouraged that Joe Lieberman doesn't call you when you call him. But please, don't stop calling.
I get frustrated with the cookie cutter responses. And maybe there's nothing you can do about it, and the value is that my issue gets tracked. That's how the value.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, I have an issue that I would like to present, even though I did bring it into the mayor's office this morning, and a gentleman said that it was his targeted area, but it really made me think that it's something that is overlooked around the state and around the country, and that's in reference to building codes or shelters. I had the opportunity or the misfortune to visit a shelter or a day program called the Something Day Program on 11th Spring Street. And they were feeding men and women. And obviously a lot of the men and women were unemployed, or some of them had mental issues, etc. No matter what you say to them, no matter what, and I don't say you, but however society views them, I cannot believe that in the country that we live in 2011, and they were probably serving about 30 men and women, that someone could be that comfortable eating in an environment like that. So my thought was, seeing that it's so convenient to have this place open, I challenged the mayor, the city councilor, and the senators to come and eat there for a week. Just sit down inside of the place and eat in that environment for a week and see if you could not find a way to fix it up. And I don't think it's a question of the state sending money, because as I sat there, I said, this is shameful, because I felt like I had stepped back into the story of the Christmas Carol, and you're waiting for Mr. Scrooge to throw out a penny. And when I left, and I was telling the manager that, and he said, some gentlemen that were in there came out to me on the street, and they said, well, I've offered my services to do construction. I'd be willing to come in and fix it up. I know how to do this, but no response. But it just bothers me that you could have a shelter. That means that there's no standard. There cannot be a standard, because people should not be eating in that type of environment. So I'm thinking that individuals, you know, that if you've never attended a shelter, if you've never been unemployed, if you never had to bring your children to a shelter to eat in that type of environment, you have no idea the conditions that these individuals are forced into. So I really believe that to make it realistic, I think you and the mayor and council should come and sit down and have dinner, because
Okay.
I personally couldn't eat there. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And it would only
Thank you
take
for
a
your
couple $100.
invitation. And there's a lot of other people who want to ask questions too, but I do want to answer your question. I know that facility very well. I've been there many times. And as I look around the room, that's a nonprofit organization. That's not a government-funded
I
organization.
realize that.
Okay. And as I look around the room, I see probably a half a dozen volunteers that go there on their own time to provide the service and bring the food and do all that. So I guess I'll acknowledge that it's not my dining room. I don't have a dining room. It's not Shirley's dining room, but God bless the people that are doing the work there.
Well, I'm not
So,
trying to
I
curse
understand,
them. I'm not
understand.
trying to curse the people that are doing the work. I'm just saying you can get comfortable with how other people are living when it's not your dining room. Now, there's a place in Boston called Rosie's Place. Everybody's place cannot look like that, but there has to be a standard where you can go in and say, I feel comfortable knowing that if someone comes in off of the street, that there's a safe and sanitary place. And that place is not safe and sanitary. It provides great
Thank you.
food.
Just real quick, I'd like the question to come to the city-owned shelter on New Street. And obviously, it's a much different facility. And certainly, Dorothy Day, as you mentioned, is not a city-owned shelter. We do routinely do health inspections there to ensure that our health code is being met. But and I've been there many times, and I've eaten there many times, as well as at the New Street shelter. So, but I encourage you to check out also, as you know, the Jericho Partnership runs an outstanding shelter over at Maple Avenue. They do a wonderful job there as well. So,
Well, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and we'll certainly look at it. And I respect your comments. But let me say one thing about the Danbury community. And I hear this from my fellow legislators across the state of Connecticut. This community is providing services without government assistance that are not available in other communities. And I'm very proud of that. And can we do better? Yeah, I think we can keep striving to do better. And can we improve that facility? We probably ought to try and figure out a way to do that. But I just want you to know, in comparison to our other communities in Connecticut, we are excelling and doing a great job without government assistance. Other questions? In the back. Pat, sorry, I can't see you.
Hi, my question is, what is the quota for state police speeding tickets in the state? It's ridiculous. I drive a sports car, I do 70 miles an hour, I'm getting buzzed by. This area of Danbury alone has so many accidents between 2 and 8 and 9, and it's all speeding. Why don't they up the ante on giving speeding tickets in this state? Open the weigh station, get that running every damn day. You'll raise money that way. You don't have to raise taxes on everybody. Let's save some money. Let's get people working. We had a show at WestCon last year. There was 6 employees supposed to be working that day. They were sitting on their butts for 6 hours. That is not work. That is wasteful spending. We have to stop spending money. Not raising taxes on gas. For alcohol, yes, raise it. You want to cut down drinking, raise it. What about cigars? You forgot about cigars.
Thank you.
Tons.
I don't think.
Let's save some money. Let's cut.
I agree.
We're not cutting. We're spending. We're wasteful spending.
So you're telling me to slow down, and my wife agrees. And
You guys.
and I don't believe that the state police have quotas.
They should.
Danbury police have a new motorcycle unit,
And it's very good.
and they are going to pay for those motorcycles. So watch yourself around town.
Yes, I did.
And you can't see them either, because you just sort of sneak up on them, like I do. I didn't get a ticket, I wasn't speeding, but it scared me when I saw the guy. It like came out of nowhere.
You built a bridge on White Street for the college kids to walk across. Right. Like that wouldn't work. Then we put a sign in the middle of the road, must stop for students crossing. That was supposed to eliminate people from walking on the sidewalk, on the block. It didn't, at all. It made it worse.
Thank
That's
you.
wasteful spending.
I just want to go back to the question the gentleman raised up front a little while ago about the distribution of the sales tax in the state. I understand what you're saying about corporations and they're giving bulk payments to the government, but isn't there a way for our government to go back to these corporations, because you know they're tracking what are their better selling stores, to go back and say, when you submit these taxes to us, this tax information, can you please break it down by region? And along with that, I want to find out how that enters into the ECS credits for education and what is actively being done in the legislature right now to see that Danbury gets more credits back on the ECS funding.
Okay. Two good comments. First one, I thought I said, and maybe I didn't say clear enough, I think we're going to fix that concern about the reporting. I think that Danbury is going to get its fair share, assuming that this proposal passes. I think they're going to figure out a way to do that, because this guy sitting in the corner isn't going to put up with Farmington getting his sales tax money, right? Or our taxpayers getting the money. The ECS funding challenge has been a challenge since I was in school. And if I'm not mistaken, it was 7 years ago that the mayor joined several other chief elected officials and sued the state of Connecticut to fix the program. It's still not fixed. It's not going to be fixed in this budget. It is making progress, though, with changing the formulas that should be more favorable to a municipality like Danbury. But the problem is that fixes cost lots of money. So they're not going to be anxious to fix it now because they are so broke, they have to reform other parts of state government before they can get to that. If they fix it the way it should be fixed, they'd probably have to lose a third of the state government employees just to pay for it. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. So a fix is in the works, and so is Super 7. I don't mean to dismiss you, but I just want you to know that it's on the table, they're thinking about it, they're working on it, it's been in court, and a fix is coming, but it won't come this year.
With some of these new taxes that they're talking about, like the clothing and footwear under $50 and whatnot, is there a way to earmark some of these proposals to see that the money goes, instead of it going to a general fund where there's no real transparency as to where the money's being spent, is there a way to earmark it and a way to make sure, a way to ensure, I should say, that, certain cities are getting equitable amounts of the distribution of the funds, of the revenue that they're creating?
Well, that sounded like you earmark your own budget at home. You've got certain income and you put it in a certain bucket and it's going to stay there. Government doesn't earmark well. Probably the best example of government not earmarking well is Social Security. There's a Social Security trust fund. The problem is it's full of IOUs from the federal government. So state government is the same way. We have a transportation fund that's supposed to be just fix the roads, but they keep grabbing the money, spending it on something else. The lockbox idea doesn't work well traditionally in federal government or state government. But I believe that if some of that money from the sales tax does indeed, with this proposal, trickle down to the local municipalities, they're doing a real good job of managing the limited resources they have available, and they're going to figure out a way to put the right resources in the right place, based upon comments like yours. Sure.
I think the major problem is not so much the taxing, but you got to stop the spending. You have to, really, cut the spending. What do you think is the chances of getting the lawyer to cut back on spending, which is going up another $500 million right there, and really cut the spending, state government's going about, and you local government, spending about 3 times the rents of the economy. Soon everybody will be working for the state. That occurs, there's no way to pay for it.
Well, that's
totally unsustainable.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's the federal government too. I mean, when I was talking about the growth of jobs in the state of Connecticut, the largest growth was from the government sector. We're already proving that we're relying on government to do too much, frankly. I think that's a great question to ask the governor when he comes on April 6th. I can't speak for him. I wouldn't try to speak for him in that regard, but there are some really tough decisions that have to occur. And frankly, when the state employees, if they don't come to the table, there's going to be some forced cuts in state spending that'll be pretty dramatic.
I've been on a school board, it dealt with union spending. And basically what I've seen is that the union management, all the senior personnel, and they all have the last in, first out kind of thing. So if somebody gets fired, it's supposed to be off their time. It's those younger employees. So they don't want to negotiate. They'll take the raises and keep the raises, and they're gonna give you a give back. But the new guys get fired, and the old guys who are running the unions take home their pay. And that's the way it's worked. And unless you change the law and say, you know, we're gonna have everybody vote on this in the union, and not the deal with negotiators, you're not gonna get those give backs.
Right. Well, you know, you raise a good point. Last in, first out is common practice in government. You are hearing about some areas very close to us, not in Connecticut, but some states very close to us that are actually thinking about, it's not last in, first out anymore. We're actually going to look at your merits of how you work as an employee before we decide who gets laid off first. So that's being considered in other states and been passed in a few states already. I don't see that in Connecticut in the foreseeable future with this legislature or with this government.
I mean, Connecticut is very pro-union, of course, you get the prevailing wage things, it costs typically 30% more for building on the prevailing wage than built by private contractors. And almost everything, if you look at cities will, like say, privatize something like garbage collection, typically costs have gone down by 30%. So when you privatize things, you generally save 30% of the money. Okay? So the state doesn't want to privatize anything, they just want to be union friendly, and that costs a lot of money.
Thank you. Gentleman behind you.
Does the state employees pay union dues?
I believe they do.
Well, then why don't the union pay their retirement?
That's a reasonable question for the governor. It's part of the collective bargaining process. We have provided benefits based upon our union negotiations over the last many years. I will tell you that each year that a contract comes up, there are efforts to reduce the cost of the union contract. If you look at state employee benefits, for an employee who's retiring today, it's called Tier 1. That's someone who's been there over 25 years. Their pension benefit is about 30% more valuable than an employee who started 10 years ago. So over the years, there are different tiers in the system. Local municipalities have the same thing, where some employees hired before 1968 in the city of Danbury have one level of pension, and the employees that are being hired today have a different level. That's all part of the negotiating process. I don't think we're likely to get to sort of the old-fashioned AFL-CIO benefit package that's paid for by the unions. It essentially is paid for by the government or the private enterprise.
But if they pay dues, they should get retirement from that, right? No?
Well, that's one way to do it. Frankly, I don't see it happening here.
Most unions do get pensions.
Yeah, that's true. Government employee unions are very different from private sector unions in the way that they negotiate, because of the rights they have are stronger. The government employee union rights are far stronger than they are for the private sector
Well,
unions.
I know they donate a lot of money to the politicians.
Tom.
The first point up there, the highest per capita tax. If you were the highest paid person in the country, you said to your boss you could live on that, nobody would believe you. Yet Como and Christie and O'Malley, I think, in Maryland, all get it. But this governor doesn't seem to get it.
April 6th, 7 o'clock, Broadview Middle School. Okay, I got to get people who haven't talked yet. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Senator, first of all, thanks for coming and conferring before this inquisition. A relatively easy one. We're broke, we don't have any money, yet I keep hearing that there's a proposal to provide in-state tuition rates for let me be politically correct, undocumented aliens in their colleges? Is that going to fly?
Well, it's not a new idea. What Bill was talking about is in the state college system, there is an in-state tuition for a resident of Connecticut and an out-of-state tuition for someone who's not from Connecticut, and they pay more money. Quite a lot more money. And currently this is a federal law, by the way. This was decided by a federal court. So this is not unique to Connecticut. Someone who is an undocumented alien, as you refer to, who doesn't have a green card, has to pay a non-resident tuition because they're not a resident. There is a bill pending, and it passed the Education Committee. Does have a lot of support in our legislature to eliminate that so that those individuals will now qualify as in-state tuition at a lower rate. I frankly don't think that's going to stand up in court. So it could very well pass. Governor Malloy has stated he will sign the bill. I just don't think it's going to stand up in court because the federal court has already ruled on that issue. I think it's going to get thrown out. Yes, sir.
Mike, if that did go through, let me give you a hypothetical. A nephew of mine in Massachusetts, 2 terms in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, got a Purple Heart. Lives in Massachusetts, wants to go to UConn. Does he pay out of state?
Yes.
Yes.
And you raise a point about the issue of the in-state for a certain population and not for others. The constitutional claim on this, which is decided by a federal judge, would essentially say that someone who lives in Massachusetts then should qualify for in-state rates if someone who's here illegally in the country qualifies for in-state rates. And that's why I just don't think it's going to pass constitutional muster. And it'll be thrown out by a federal judge is what the lawyers are telling me. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what the lawyers are telling me this won't. It may very well pass the legislature and be signed by Governor Malloy. It'll be immediately challenged, and I think it'll just get tied up in court. Behind you.
I just wanted to thank you so much for not having to look at a teleprompter to answer your questions like somebody else I know.
Thank you. I studied my notes before I came.
Hi, Mike. I want to go back to this gentleman in the front that brought up about what we can do. And I know you sent me a personal email back, and Mike does respond to everybody that he does get emails from, so my kudos to you, Mike, on that. I think the big thing is that going through my mind, but everybody remembers the income tax from Governor Weicker. All right, he protested in the state of Connecticut. We wrote letters. We had petitions, and we still were defeated. I'm really, my heart goes out. What can I do? I don't think we can do enough, because if we couldn't defeat the income tax, how are we going to defeat Governor Malloy's proposals? Can you tell me that?
Join the Tea Party.
Well, that's part of that.
I can't minimize the importance of participation in the political process. Right from the beginning in the campaign process, all the way through to the legislative process. And I can't also urge you enough to keep contacting your elected officials. When you got something on your mind, we can't read your mind.
Right.
You have to tell us. And I must say that sometimes I'm surprised what people call me about. I'm still concerned about what they're concerned about, but sometimes I'm surprised because I just never thought about it before. I'll give you a case in point. Here's an example, sort of a silly example, but I took a little bit of heat for it, so I want to explain it. I got an email from a family who was upset following last Veterans Day that their child came home from school and the father asked the child, "What did you learn about Veterans Day today?" And the child said, "Nothing. What's that?" And so the parents wrote to me, email, and said, can you do something about that? I mean, shouldn't we be teaching the kids something about Veterans Day and Memorial Day? And I said, you're right, we should. That's a good idea. So I submitted a bill in the legislature, and it got a public hearing. Sorry, it did not get a public hearing. But we submitted the bill to raise the issue for conversation. Now, this might take a few years to make it happen, but that's citizen participation in government. That was their bill in the legislature. That was not Mike McLachlan's bill. They had a concern. And by the way, when I did some research, I found out a lot of people were concerned about it, especially the veterans organizations. So what we discovered in that process was that we can do veteran awareness education in the public school system, and actually all the schools in Danbury, and it won't cost government a dime. Because if I'm not mistaken, there's a dozen veterans in this room who would love to go into the schools and talk about Veterans Day. So there you have it. Participation. You got to raise your hand. When you got something on your
Write
mind.
letters, do petitions, do whatever.
You got to write. You got to call. I'll go back to the point. Email is lowest impact. It's convenient. It's lowest impact. Phone call, pretty good impact. Form letter, okay. Handwritten note, I'm calling you. That's how I handle it. So,
Thank you.
all the way in the back.
You're talking about reducing costs, Mike, and I've emailed you a couple things, and I'm going to handwrite them from now on, I guess. But you did respond.
Did I kick you aside? I'm sorry.
Yeah. In any organization, be it private business, federal government, state or local, we all know the big expense of people costs. And you're working on it on the pension piece, and we've got to change that, because one of the emails that I sent you is the Bureau of Labor came out, and I've got the figures here, but it's about a $10 to $15 difference between public sector and private sector per hour. And that's a big hit for the taxpayer to continue to do that type of funding. I've got a question on Medicaid, which is driving state expenses, because the states have to pay for that. Today's Wall Street Journal, the state of Rhode Island, our next door neighbor, went to the federal government and asked for a waiver on the way they distribute Medicaid expenses. It has saved them over $1 billion in 18 months. Are you guys thinking about anything like that at the state legislature to go forward to the federal government and ask for a waiver, and go visit Rhode Island and ask them, how did you implement this thing to save that kind of bucks? And you can comment. The other one I want to ask you on is what we're doing in the state government. Every department, and I know people that work for the state, they've got their own payroll, they've got their own this, duplication of effort. Where's the consolidation? In a business, when things get tough, they look to consolidate so that we don't have 18 people doing the same job. And you bring them together, and you can, get a cost containment on this thing. So those are two things that maybe, can start saving the state some money. If you're working on that, I'd like to hear about that.
Okay, I think that was 3 questions, but first, pension. You're right, I did submit a pension reform bill. There were more than one, but I'll cover the primary one, and that was suggesting that state government employees hired beginning July 1, 2011, this is prospective, not looking back, would qualify for 401k, or what's known as defined contribution plan, as opposed to the pension plan we have now, which costs about 60% more. So 401k, that's what I had in the private sector myself. Couldn't even get a public hearing. They wouldn't even talk about it. So that's the problem with pension reform in Connecticut. Another bill I put in, just because I was cranky, was to refuse to allow double dipping. We have a Supreme Court judge in the state of Connecticut who is retired, will collect a pension. It's all legit. She's done her state service, qualifies for a pension. Now is going to be a commissioner of the state of Connecticut and will collect a salary of $160,000 a year in addition to her pension. So I submitted a bill to say, no, you can't have them both at the same time. You can have your pension when the time comes, but you can't have it now. Couldn't get a public hearing. So that's the pension issue. The Rhode Island waiver, I've raised that issue, and I've been dismissed instantly saying Rhode Island's going to regret it, was the response I got. Rhode Island will regret it. We don't know. The jury's still out on whether or not the Rhode Island waiver would work for Connecticut. When I asked about it, I was given a number of reasons why it wouldn't work here. It's not going to happen here, apparently.
Can I just ask who that is that you asked? Is that somebody in the federal government, or is that somebody in the state government?
No, state government has to be initiated by the governor. Yeah.
So that's the governor's office?
I asked him, yeah, that's going to be initiated there and then ultimately approved perhaps by the legislature because of the tentacles of that decision. But it's got to be initiated in the executive branch. Okay, I'm going to one that hasn't spoken.
Thank you, Mike. I'm a person of common sense, and it seems to me that we're asking too much at this time to close the deficit. If you did 25% of what you're asking, perhaps you wouldn't even have to have this meeting. Perhaps your phones wouldn't be ringing. Seems like he's trying to close this gap in 2 years. I don't understand that. Okay, why do you want to put more people on an unemployment line, create problems within the government people who do belong to a union, and create all of this for 2 years? But from a common sense point, can't we extend this over 4 years or 5 years to not have all this?
Well, that's a reasonable question. The problem is that government has to run on annual budgets. In the state of Connecticut, we run on a biennium budget. So this is the year that we have to create a 2-year budget. You're being very reasonable, and it's a common sense, you're right, to try and spread it out. Here's how you could do that. Here's how you can spread it out. You can raise more taxes until we get to where you want to be 4 years from now. Or you borrow money like we did last year to get there. But either way, it's either more taxes or more borrowing to get there, because this governor is not cutting spending.
With the tolls. Maybe you have to go to tolls.
I'm not a toll fan, for a lot of reasons.
Oh, but you're hitting the fan.
For a lot of reasons. Sir?
I have a question, Senator. What happens if all of a sudden the state gets told it has to increase the percentage of funding in the state pension funds? Right now, where the state pensions are funded at what percent?
45.
Okay. And we should, by right, shouldn't they really be in the 70% range?
Well, if you use GASB 45 and GAAP, you use the normal accounting principles that private industry has to use, it would have to be a far higher number, approaching 80%. Mr. Robbins.
Two things. I'm sure you're aware that the chairman of the Transportation Committee was on TV on Sunday talking about tolls. I think Route 11 as well as border tolls. I know you're not. I know you oppose it, as well as on a bipartisan level, most state legislators in this area. What is being done to combat the drumbeat of bringing back tolls in Connecticut? And number two, Sunday liquor sales. I know it died in committee, but there's a chance it could come back in the General Assembly. What is your stance on Sunday liquor sales?
Thank you for those questions. I've vigorously opposed tolls since I arrived at the legislature, because the first proposal when I got there was for border tolls, meaning they were going to put them in Danbury, Greenwich, Northern Connecticut, and Rhode Island border. And I opposed them specifically because it's an unfair regional tax. That means that the people that live in our area get to pay the tolls because we live around the tolls, and the people in central Connecticut that don't cross the border don't have to. So I thought it was patently unfair. More importantly, I thought it was a challenge to more traffic on local roads in close proximity to the borders, because if you think about people, sometimes will drive a couple of miles to save $5 in a store. They'll certainly get off the highway one exit early to save $3 on a toll. And I thought that the toll diversion traffic was going to be detrimental to our region, and that means Danbury, New Fairfield, and Sherman. Tolls probably are not a dead issue. It died in the Transportation Committee. Our process means that we have a certain deadline that we're allowed to look at particular issues. If the committee approves of something, they pass it out of committee and it goes to the floor of the House or the Senate for further consideration. It has died in that part of the process. Tolls can be revived in the back room by way of an amendment and come back out on the floor, which it likely will. So tolls are not dead yet. I think they're coming back because when the state employee unions don't come up with $2 billion, you betcha they're going to go find some more money. I'm opposed to Sunday sales of liquor. Listen, I'm outnumbered on that. They tell me, or at least the liquor companies tell me, that 70% of Connecticut residents are in favor of Sunday sales of liquor. I spent a good part of my working career in the car business, and I left the car business when the car dealers opened on Sundays, because I burned out. I was working 7 days a week. And that's what the package store owners are telling us about Sunday sales. Stu Leonard's is open already. Doesn't affect them. Stop and Shop and A&P, they're open already. Doesn't affect them. They just get to open up that shade, the curtain over the beer. But the local package store owner in Danbury, and we've got 27 package stores, little neighborhood package stores here in Danbury, they are telling me that they can't afford to hire another employee to work the extra shift on a Sunday, and all it means is their 100-hour week goes to 110. And I agree with them on that. I agree that we can't burn out these small package stores. And here's the other point. When we changed our liquor sales in Connecticut from Monday through Saturday until 8 p.m., and we went to 9 p.m., the liquor store owners told me something that was not a surprise to me. The only difference in their sales were the people that raced in the door at 5 of 8 now were racing in the door at 5 of 9. So I think the point is, give them a rest. I don't see a significant increase in state revenue by the taxes that will be collected from Sunday sales. I don't want to burn out a small business owner. That's why I'm opposed to it. It will come back the same way I told you. It died in committee. Representative Joe Taversack chairs that committee. And, he gets credit for squashing that idea in the committee process. It's coming back in the back room, I'm sure. Okay, well, we've hit our 8 o'clock time limit. I'm going to stay for a while afterwards. And I welcome you to contact me by phone, email, fax, letter, and what's the best way?